Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. After taking his oath of office yesterday, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari walked away from the Eagle Square, venue of the presidential swearing-in ceremony, without as much as saying a word to the audience. Hours later, news emerged that the president would on Thursday jet out to Saudi Arabia for a meeting of the Organization of Islamic Conference. What does this development portend? Well, for a closer look at this and some of the other issues arising from the inauguration ceremonies yesterday, we're now being joined by Jideofor Adibe, a professor of political science and international relations at Nasarawa State University, Kefi. He's also a newspaper columnist. Jideofor, good morning. Jideofor, good morning. Where have you been? Quite a long time.
Yeah, good morning.
How are you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's quite a long time.
Well,
not really long. I was here a couple of weeks ago.
Well, good to have you on the morning show. Now, what's your take on
yeah, thank you very
much. Presidential inauguration ceremony at the Eagle Square in Abuja yesterday? Many Nigerians have complained about the fact that the president did not give a speech, and almost immediately after, what we've been told is that he's even going out to Saudi Arabia to attend a meeting of the OIC without even trying to take first steps to signal that his administration is already on course for a second term.
Yeah, thank you very much. A number of people have tried to interpret what happened at Eagle Square yesterday differently. Some of the supporters have argued that the president will give his inaugural a speech, a profound speech on June 12th, which is now the new Democracy Day. I do not buy that narrative. I do not buy that thesis because inauguration signals the beginning of a new era. I can tell you that since about 1790, April 1790, when George Washington gave the first inaugural, George Washington, the first president of the USA, it has been a tradition among all democratic countries. I cannot remember any democratic country in recent memory where the president, either first, whether it's first term or for a second term, where the inauguration speech was skipped. So that's I think it is a missed opportunity on the part of the president. The inaugural speech is supposed to be like a covenant. The new president makes profound statements and speeches that people expect to be a sort of covenant between him and the citizens. Also, investors look at such speeches to look at possible trajectory of the government. We didn't get it. And not only that we did not get it, we did not even get explanation on why that did not happen. And that fits into some of the critics' assessment of Buhari, either not caring or being insensitive to public mood. I don't know what that portends for the second term, but many people are expecting that things will be done a little differently. If that signal is anything to go by, then people are saying that we are probably going to get more of the same. And those who have raised the hope that some of the ministers that are considered to be round pegs in square holes may even come back. We don't know. We just have to wait. All I know is that it's a missed opportunity. There is no way it can be explained away. And the president simply has to, and the people who are minding the president, they simply have to look into it, because if you continue to do what you've always done, you will continue to get what you've always got. Critics, when he says never, his own critics will also say nevertheless. And it will sort of be the same thing as we saw in the first term. We were hoping, and I am one of those who still believe, that the president may surprise us anytime, come with speech that will embody profound policy statements. You know, he should be able to announce key aids, especially those that do not require confirmation by the Senate. Virtually all the governors, 29 governors yesterday, they made speeches, inaugural speeches. Why is his own different? He is the first president in modern era that I can think of that failed to do so. And I don't think we should explain it away. We should call a spade a spade.
Well, you referred to the United States and inauguration traditions. Also absent, apart from the speech, was the conspicuously empty seats which should have been occupied by our former heads of state and president, who decided for various reasons which have not been explained to stay away from the event. What is your take on this?
Well, again, it depends on how you look at it. Some people may say because, you know, there is still a court case, but we can also understood the absence of Jonathan. Jonathan is a PDP man. The absence of Obasanjo. Obasanjo is vehemently against the government, Buhari government. It may be a little more difficult to explain the absence of Abdul Salami, but maybe he can also say because the issue is still under disputation. All I know is that the absence also, you know, the absence of those leaders, including those invited from abroad, will raise some legitimacy questions. And the fact that the president...
Prof, may I interject here? Whether or not anybody is in PDP or APC, should that matter? If we're looking at the US and inaugural traditions, we can recall Hillary Clinton attending President Trump's inauguration. Whether she gritted her teeth throughout or not is immaterial. The fact is that she was a former First Lady of the United States of America. Should there not be a tradition that sort of overrides the pettiness of political affiliation? It's not an invitation to a family wedding, it's to a state function.
Yeah, let me say this. If, for example, Jonathan had gone there when the candidate of his party is contesting the outcome of the election, that will also send a wrong signal. So we can understand if the very partisan former presidents, if they stay away because the process, the outcome of the election is still being disputed. We're also not even sure whether they were invited and their own explanations for being away. So we can leave a lot of things hanging there. For the world leaders that we don't know whether they were also invited, but if they were invited and they did not show up and did not send representation, well, that also raises some questions. And all we know is that things are going to play out. You know, we'll get these explanations sooner than later. What people are concerned about is the lack of explanation, and that has been part of the style of the Buhari government in the first term, that people were saying, oh, we are hoping that this style is changed because it's not going to win you friends. When people are going to deconstruct it as more or less either arrogance or not caring about what people think about his style. Some of his supporters say, well, he's a strong of being a strong leader. He doesn't want to be bullied by public opinion. He doesn't want to be bullied by public expectations. Yes, that may be one way of looking at it. But when you take actions like that, you accentuate the points of the critics that say, oh, he's insensitive. Why do you want to give your critics ammunitions to shoot you? That's one thing the government has to look at. It's not about your intention. Intentions are immaterial, because even the road to hell, we are told, you know, was paved with the best of intentions. So it's about the government trying now to manage the optics. How will people deconstruct particular actions? I'll give you an example. Just a few days after Obasanjo talked about Fulanization, the government announced the setting up of a radio that will broadcast exclusively in Fulfulde language. Well, the intention may be right, you know, to manage this header farmer crisis. The intention may be okay, but the timing was wrong. And then there is even the constitutional issue of whether Fulfulde is one of the languages, you know, recognized. So we are going back into the way the government manages optics, perceptions of the government. And the Buhari government simply...
Absolutely.
Hello?
Sorry,
So
Professor.
the government,
Another issue that I was going to raise is the fact that the president has also not necessarily come out to share his cabinet with us, tell us about his new appointments. Yet, of course, we have the news that he's off to Saudi Arabia today. Like Dr. Abbasi rightly said, even as soon as Governor Sanwo-Olu was sworn in Lagos State, he almost immediately announced his chief of staff. What message is this passing across to the people as well, and how do you feel towards this?
it is just the same thing with not giving an inaugural. There are two reasons why many leaders appoint some of the key staff at the inaugural. One is to give that sense of urgency that they are going to hit the ground running from day one. The other one is that the appointments made also give indication of the trajectory a particular government is going to take. Investors are going to look at people, your cabinet, what are their own philosophical dispositions. So the appointees and their philosophical dispositions are also going to affect the particular trajectory of a government. So by the time they look at the inaugural speech and the people appointed, then they begin to, put two and two together to be able to say, well, this is likely to happen and this is not likely to happen. So if Buhari, for example, had made certain key appointments, we will know whether the hardliners are going to continue to, hold the government captive, whether new blood are being injected, whether people that are independent-minded are going to be there, whether he is now leaning towards technocrats, or whether it's going to be just more of the same. If, for example, he made certain appointments, well, people will just from day one give up on the government. And I think this idea of not appointing means is no sense of urgency. Don't forget, he was declared president-elect more than 2 months ago. So there's ample time. The last time we were told that the Jonathan government was not cooperating in handing over. Now who are you going to blame? So sometimes the government likes to give its critics ammunitions to shoot it. And that's one of the things it has to avoid if it wants to have a very successful tenure, second-term tenure.
Well, I mean, on the question of the inaugural speech, some people have said cynically that the president didn't have anything to say because there would have been nothing to say about the Jonathan administration or blame the PDP for whatever may not have happened. But that's on the lighter side. But on the issue of appointments that you have just raised, now, when the president had a valedictory session with the cabinet a few weeks ago, he commended the team that worked with him between 2015 and 2019. Again, when he granted an interview to an NTA correspondent, he also again sounded very positive about the team that he has worked with. Suppose the president decides to retain the 2015 to 2019 team, would that be a good thing? And then added to that, what are your own expectations? What kind of cabinet would you like to see? Do you think this cabinet is as great as the president makes out, or you should just send all of them away and appoint new faces?
I think there are still a few of them that have done well. I'm not going to name names in my own opinion. But I think it's also a general consensus that many of them are just second 11. They are just round pegs in square holes. But then if the president feels satisfied by their performance, that's also an indication of the divorce between him and public expectations. And there are things we are looking at when he said he's now going to embrace try to reach out to other people. At the same time, he said he was going now to try to reach out and be an inclusive government. The national chairman of the APC, in his usual rambunctious rhetoric, came up in a very, very triumphalist mood to say, we're not going to share positions with the opposition because if the people wanted the opposition, to have this, they should have voted for them. That's again, we'll be looking at where does he place the likes of Oshiomhole in his cabinet. Is he going to have people who are extremely polarizing, or is he going to bring new blood that will unify this country? This country has never been as divided as it is now since the end of the Civil War. So I think the primacy, the primary drive of the government should be to bring not just technocrats, but people who have this temperament to unify people. And we are looking at the kind, that's personally what I'm looking at. I'm looking at an economic team. He has an economic management team that does not have even one economist in it. How can you have an economic? The economic management teams are lawyers, made up of lawyers. They may be distinguished in their careers. They may be very good in grammar and rhetorics, but you still cannot say you have an economic team without experienced and renowned economists, in the team. So these are the kind of things we are looking at. It does seem that his preference is people who are just very loyal to him, very loyal to the APC, and we are seeing it in the statement by some of the APC's apparatchiks, that they are more interested in who has done what to win the awards, who has done what, to win elections for the party, rather than people with the necessary competence. A president, that's where a president doesn't necessarily need to have the kind of energy people we are saying. It's simply somebody who is able to bring people of varied talents, and be able to manage and make them work together. That's what we are looking for. We are not concerned, I'm personally not concerned about Buhari's age. In the US, all the major candidates now in their late 70s, from Joe Biden to, it's not an issue for them, because whoever is the president is expected to appoint people experienced in their field, technocrats, blended with politicians who will drive the country forward, and the president will simply be a coordinator. That's what we are looking for, and we are yet to see it.
Indeed. The president is also being criticized for his decision to attend the 14th OIC Islamic Summit, the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, in Saudi Arabia. Now, according to Garba Shehu, his spokesperson, he's going to discuss issues of security, which we all know is a huge problem in Nigeria today, trying to tackle Islamist fundamentalism, and also raise the issue of the Lake Chad Basin, which, if you recall, when the president of the United Nations General Assembly visited Nigeria earlier this month, she identified that as a global humanitarian disaster. But what do you make of the criticisms, and what do you make of the rationale that has been stated by the presidency for his attendance?
First of all, I have no problem with the president attending the OIC meeting. I have absolutely no problem with that. As a matter of fact, if he had included it in his inaugural, if he had taken time to, write an inaugural speech and included it, for example, the security aspect, lamented the insecurity in the country, and then promising the country, look, as soon as I leave this place, the following day, that's today, I'm jetting out to Saudi Arabia because we have to find a solution to this insecurity. That would have regaled well with the public. But you didn't say anything. So don't forget that because he doesn't say anything, he doesn't say very much, you open up the space for conspiracy theorists to come with all manner of narratives and theorizing. So people are going to read various interpretations to that. The president has gone to manifestly Christian countries. There's nothing wrong in his going to Saudi Arabia, in my opinion. But because he has not done what he should have done, other narratives and questions of hidden agenda will continue. If you do not do what you should do, then you open up the space for people to interpret your intentions for you. I think the president simply has to look at this. The second term, he's not going to believe that, people are going to just keep quiet. Don't forget that, when there's a legitimacy crisis, when there is bias remorse, there's a tendency for a government to become repressive or become nonchalant. But historically, such will also increase the resistance to such a government. And we don't want to get to that point. What we are saying is that you need to change your ways, because if you keep doing the same thing that you have done all throughout your first term, don't expect a different outcome.
Absolutely, sir. And a point that you mentioned prior to that was with regards to the president's economic team and how there's not a single economist on the team. It's more lawyers and people that are veterans in their own fields, but not the economy. Let's speak about the economy for a second. What are your outlooks for the Nigerian economy over the next year?
Well, I don't know. I can tell you that we use more than 60% of our revenues to service our debts. I don't know how that will play out. I don't know. The president also himself had started dampening, lowering expectations by saying that his second term will be very tough. The projections, global projections, is also that there will be a slowdown in the economy. The slowdown in China is going to, in the economic slowdown in China is going to reverberate throughout the entire world. We don't know how that will play out in our own country. All we know is that things are not easy. Things are not smooth. But whether the president gets it or keeps on believing in his own narrative that he's doing, and the narrative of the political jobbers around him that he's doing marvelously well, there are people who criticize him because they are welling wellers or because he's corruption fighting back, then the ground is not open enough for, honest conversations. But what we are looking for, what we are calling for, is that let there be honest conversations about our situation. Yes, the president, you've tried your best in some areas in, say, for example, trying to contain the Boko Haram. But then we will also tell, look, the history of Boko Haram is that it has the capacity to reinvent itself. Years ago, in its original incarnation, it was attacking state institutions. Then it moved to attacking Christian areas, then to attacking Muslim areas, then to attacking everybody. Now it has moved from attacking soft targets to carrying the battle to military installations. That's a reinvention, and the government has to see it. Instead of just believing in its narrative that, it's just trying to mop up the terrorists. Historically, terrorism is not easily defeated. We are talking about how to contain them. So the fundamental mistake was made initially when he gave them 3 months, the military 3 months to defeat them, as if they were engaged in conventional warfare rather than asymmetric warfare. So that, a number of things, for example, when he came on board, it was only the Northeast that had serious security challenge. Now the entire Northwest, which had been a zone of tranquility, is now ravaged by banditry, by kidnappers. You go to North Central, the herders farmers confrontation, which had always been there, has accelerated. And across the country, kidnapping, ritual, killing for ritual and the rest, they are all there. So the insecurity has actually intensified. Instead of just keep on, beating your chest that you have contained the Boko Haram, which may be true because you've recovered seized territories. But then when you came on board, it was 1/3. Now it's 3/3. So we have to be very cautious when we get into that triumphalist mood that you have done very well in the security front. We are not saying the government has not done anything. And the same thing goes to the economy. I applaud the government for continuing with the projects, inherited from Jonathan administration, because one of the problems we've had in this country is, the lack of continuity in projects, sustainability. But Buhari has taken on, and I give him credit for that, been able to sustain some of the initiatives from the Jonathan administration. There are about 11,000 abandoned projects in this country. And what we want is not just to keep on seeing so many policy pronouncements. Let those that are on the ground be mopped up. Let us not be we need infrastructure. Let us not be pretending that there was nothing on the ground before you came on board. We have also to be able to do this in a very reasonable manner. The debt profile, instead of focusing that we are under borrowed, because if you compare our debt to GDP ratio, it shows we are under borrowed. We also have to think of capability to repay, and that's why we should also be focusing on the ratio between the revenue and our debt profile. So we need a new thinking. We need conversations. We need to engage the government more, and we are calling out on the president. to open up the space so that he will also be, be able to take part, or his advisors take meaningful part in this kind of conversation rather than regarding anybody who takes a contrary position to what the government says or does as an enemy.
Well, quickly, I mean, well, hopefully President Buhari on June 12 will try to redeem his administration and use the opportunity, the feedback from Nigerians to address all of these concerns that we have raised in this conversation. On the issue of the economic management team, I've heard somebody say, one publication saying the 28-man uneconomic management team of Nigeria, but that's another issue entirely. There is also a National Economic Council in place, which is chaired by the Vice President. But the major concern has been the misalignment between the monetary side and the fiscal side of the economy, with the CBN having had in the last 2 years to try to bridge the gap. But let's talk about something else. I mean, a day after Inauguration Day, we have IPOB, the Indigenous Peoples of Biafra movement, saying that the people of the South-South and the Southeast must sit at home, boycott every activity as a form of protest to say that the dream of Biafra, the sovereignty of their, the planned Biafra has not died yet. And only a few weeks ago, Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of IPOB, was quoted as saying, whoever does not sit at home today in the Southeast and the South-South deserves the death sentence. What do you make of all of this within the context of our expectations that there should be peace and stability going forward in every part of Nigeria?
First of all, let me tell you that the crisis because there has not been sufficient investment in intangible unity projects, the number of groups and individuals delinking from the Nigeria projects, is increasing. It's not just IPOB and Boko Haram. The other day I read about Yoruba separatist groups and the rest of them. This is itself an indication of a crisis in the nation-building project. And that is why some of us are hoping that the government ought to have prioritized rebuilding trust among the different constituents of this country and, making sure that people feel that they are stakeholders in the project. There's no need to just dismiss people and all this. First, I don't believe in Nnamdi Kanu, but I don't believe in what they say. But I do recognize that there are serious issues of nation building. There are serious issues of the national question, which various Nigerians have tried to throw up under different names, from constitutional conference to restructuring. These are the issues, or this is one of the critical issues the government ought to look at. Whatever Nnamdi says is only tapping into public moods. If you look at Boko Haram and other separatist groups, they will only tap into public mood. And that public mood, when they tap into it, will seem to suggest that, they are popular. No, it's just because they're able to graft themselves into certain discontent. You saw it but sometimes when you carry a referendum, you find out that those people do not really have a support. We do not have to misunderstand or mistake tapping into a particular discontent to being an acceptance of people who try to graft themselves into such discontent and benefit from it. There will always be fringe groups like Nnamdi Kanu's. And let me tell you, in any country that has gone through a war, if you go to the U.S. Civil War ended in the 18th century, isn't it? Is it 18th, 19th century? You go to the southern part of the U.S., you still see the Confederacy flags. You go to Germany, you still see the Nazi, the swastika. These are normal things that will continue to be there, Even countries that have not fought wars, when you have an agglomeration of different nationality, ethnic groups to constitute a nation, sometimes such issues will come up. If you go to Canada, you see the Quebecans will episodically come up with quests to become separate. In England, in the United Kingdom, Scotland has been part of the United Kingdom for 300 years. There's still the quest. Periodically, they'll bring up the issue of separation. So these are the things that we have to live with. However, if there is sufficient investment in the nation-building process and people are convinced that they are better off being in the union than out of the union, those things, those people with such agitations, some of them will always be around, but they will be confined to the fringe of the political process.
Well, Jideofor, that's interesting. But you know, of course, that across Europe, you were talking about the Nazi and all that, you know, but there's actually not, there isn't actually a Nazi party. There is an upsurge of nationalist sentiments, and the far right, which dominated the last European parliamentary elections, you know, across Europe. And many of these European leaders, in Germany, Angela Merkel in particular, you know, is trying to see what can be done to make sure that there isn't that kind of, you know, movement that is promoted by racism or hate or intolerance. But in any case, I get your point. Leila, you were going to say something.
Yes, I was actually I was going to speak with regards to the economic outlook again, more so to do with the projections that we have for the second administration, not necessarily the problems that we're looking at that we went through during President Muhammadu Buhari's first term and his first administration. Now, moving forward, sir, and looking ahead at the next 4 years between now and 2023, given the indices that we're working with, from unemployment to every human development index that we can think of, do you feel that there is some sort of hope and positivity for our growth? Or do you believe that unless this administration steps up and goes about things in a different way, then we're going to continue on regressing?
Let me tell you that I've always been a believer in the resilience of Nigerians. During the structural adjustment program of the 80s, mid-80s and 90s, people thought it was all over for the middle class. People found a way of, you know, bringing themselves back. They say even in the most anarchical situation, opportunities are thrown up for some people. So one is the resilience of Nigerians. I think the resilience of Nigerians is, you know, is going to be a big factor here. In fact, somebody made a joke and said Nigeria is tough, but those who live in it are like ions. So we are going to see that as one of our key resources. In terms of other indicators, the unemployment and all this, I think the government has said a lot of things. You know, anchor borrowers program, they have got quite a number of good initiatives. Some of them I don't believe in, like, you know, the so-called, the one they give 10,000 all of that. I think that's just a waste. What will 10,000 do to somebody?
No, it's called
trader money, I think is what they call it. Money, yeah. I don't believe in things like that. What do you need school feeding program for? Is it just to bring people to stay in school? And what stops? Can you sustain it? You want to feed people to come to school, and when the teachers and the classrooms are not even there. So what sense does it make? I see some of the intentions of the programs. Some of them are not properly thought out, in my opinion, and some of them need to be done away. Others seem to be quite good, like the one for farmers and on fertilizer, and quite a number of them can be retained and refurbished. So we need to be hopeful, but that is only depend on whether the president is also willing to change his mindset. Because if the mindset is not changed, then it's going to be a problem. If the president believes that all he has done very wonderfully well in the first term and nothing needs to be changed, then nothing will change. And then we only have to stay here and keep on blowing grammar and criticizing him. But if we see an indication of a willingness that, look, this is what we've done right in the first term, and these are things that ought to have been done better, or that we need to, you know, to change, and you bring in new blood, new strategies, then we can say that the government is really ready is listening. But so far, and with what happened yesterday, we have not seen any indication that the government is willing to listen.
So go back to your point briefly about what you, in response to Dr. Abati's question about the Biafra sit-out situation. And you made a point about this being natural as the aftermath of a civil war, civil conflict. But do we have to live with it, as you suggested? Because going by the president's famed body language, his lack of an inaugural speech, which you find so awful, might be an indication of something else. It might be an indication of the sort of prominence he's trying to give to the June 12th Democracy Day, which he has announced, and address that historical injustice. What do you think should be done to address the historical injustice of Biafra and to also heal the marginalization that's going on? Right now, Nigeria, we've talked about the economy, we've talked about security, we've talked about a whole plethora of things, but we've never been as divided as we are now. What can be done to heal some of these breaches and actually bring Biafra to the forefront and discuss that?
Let me say that the Igbos are not the only groups that are marginalized. Virtually every ethnic group in this country has an institutionalized memory of hurt and of being disadvantaged. If you go down to, I don't know if you read the press, sometimes you see the people we call the Fulani group will come around and say, look, we are being victimized. Each time there's anything, they will talk about the killing of Fulani herdsmen, killing this and killing these people without talking about Fulanis that are killed. And they regard it as an act of injustice. The militancy in the Niger Delta, don't forget, the Niger Delta group have also been, angry that they produce a lot of the resources that the country uses and they are not adequately rewarded. So there is a generalized feeling in the Southwest, some that have been clamoring at the vanguard of the whole restructuring movement. They believe that if you give them bigger elbow room, as we had in the First Republic, they will do better. So it is something that is spread across the country. And virtually every major ethnic group, there have been agitations. In fact, under Jonathan, there was some groups from the north were also agitating for actually their they want to move out of the Nigerian arrangement. But it's not only groups. The idea of people delinking from the Nigerian state, giving up on the state, is quite generalized. You can see it if you give a policeman a small amount of money, he looks the other way around. And you do the kind of impunity you want to do. That is because there's not that emotional attachment to the state and its institutions. So unless we go back and start investing on building a nation, any problem you throw at any solution you throw at the myriad of problems confronting the country becomes part of the problem. And this is something we want to see the government recognize. Instead of this rhetoric and grandstanding about fighting corruption, we want to see the privilege of unifying this country. Because if you build a nation, history has also shown that the most unified countries in the world are also countries where you have the least incidence of corruption. Look at the Scandinavian countries. So it is not just about being a new sheriff in town that people are going to be afraid of you. No. If it's about making each and every constituent feel that they are stakeholders. I can tell you, during the referendum on Scottish independence the last time, one group was called Better in the Union or something like that. In other words, the argument was to show that, look, if we remain the Union, we are better off. And that is the kind of argument that has been repeatedly used to defeat the separatist agitations by Quebecans in Quebec. So it's not about pretending that you are the most patriotic by saying the unity of this country cannot be divided. Unity is not neutral. Unity benefits certain groups, certain classes. So it is about people and individuals and constituent federating units feeling that, look, we derive better by being part of this big union. That is what we should all be clamoring. And it will be wrong to start confining it to IPOP. There is a sense of IPOP or its equivalent in every part of this country. I can promise you that. So unless we're able to go back to the basic and start knowing that the fundamental challenge we have in this problem is creating a nation, then we'll be getting it wrong.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Jideofor Adibe. But just before we go, I just want to make a comment by way of footnote on the comment you made about the school feeding program, which is part of President Buhari's social investment program. There may well be some Nigerians, and indeed there are, who insist that, look, with Nigeria having about 10.5 million children out of school, you know, with some of the states in the north, some of the states where the school feeding program is being conducted on a pilot basis, that it may be a good idea, really, you know, to adopt such a strategy as a way of motivating parents to send their children to school, as a kind of incentive, you know, for, you know, increasing school enrollment rates in some of those states. And yesterday in Oyo, in Borno, in even Kano, you know, which you mentioned earlier, you see some of these state governments, you know, also trying to adopt measures to encourage a higher rate of school enrollment. But of course, you know, that's your own opinion, and I know that the social investment program has been quite controversial. But the conversation can continue. What we cannot run away from is that, well, maybe you are right to say it's a reflection of the poverty level in the country, you know, but education is important, and whatever we can do to improve on school enrollment will be fine. But that's my own opinion. But we want to thank you very much for agreeing to come to the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to say something in response?
Put an addendum to that.
Okay, good.
Yes, I'm not, my concern is if you look at the budget, how much has been spent on feeding. Now, can you sustain that amount you spend on that feeding program? Because if the whole aim is to use food to entice people to come to school, yes, if you stop it tomorrow, what happens? So people are coming to school just to eat. Rather than, there are several other ways you can motivate people to, and then also, if you look at the budget and you look at the infrastructure of the school itself, some of the schools don't have enough teachers. Some of the students are under 3s. So which one will be better? So that you improve nominally the number of people said to be in school rather than people willing to learn. You can give material assistance to parents, indigent parents who send. There are other ways you can do that rather than just trying to benefit food contractors. I don't believe in it, and I don't think it's an economically sustainable way of getting more people to be enrolled in schools. And it's not only in the north. I understand they have it in other states. You know, even in states where the rate of enrollment is already high. Why is school feeding? People will always go there to take food, free food. Are we achieving the objective? At what cost? And is there any other a cheaper way we could you know, get the same result without squandering that amount of money in a project that is obviously not economically sustainable?
Anyway, Professor Adibe, I mean, I guess that at the end of the day, the crisis in the education sector is, you know, multidimensional. And there must be all kinds of creative ways, either budgeting, infrastructure, incentives, subsidies, you know, for states that can afford to provide such subsidies, you know, that we can do. But we need to take education seriously because it's the future. That's where the future is, for us to be able to grow a generation of Nigerians that can compete and be among the best in the world, like Professor Jideofor Adibe. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for honoring our invitation. We'll see you again sometime on this
program.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much.